He would restrict access to birth control. He would put IVF treatments at risk and, get this, force states to monitor women's pregnancies. Just Google Project 2025, which still I can't believe they put in writing. And I think everyone here knows one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government shouldn't be telling her what to do. Not the government, and not Donald Trump.
Good evening and welcome to Politics Nation. We're down to the final 3 days before Election Day 2024, and Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, along with their camps, are holding some of their last events of the campaign season. Both candidates headed to swing state of North Carolina today. We've got a busy hour with great guests. But first, let's go straight to reporters covering both campaigns tonight. Vice President Harris is speaking in Charlotte, North Carolina right now. NBC's Gary Grumbach is in Salem, Virginia, where Donald Trump will be speaking soon. Gary, what has been the main message from the Trump campaign today?
Yeah, he just arrived to the building, Rev, so we are just moments away, likely, from Donald Trump taking the stage here. But it is interesting that he's in Virginia just days before the election. The thinking here is that this, of course, is not a battleground state. What they're trying to do is expand the map. You saw him in New Mexico a few days ago. You saw him at the Madison Square Garden rally last week. And now you're here in Virginia, in Salem, Virginia, as this is just wrapping up in terms of the campaign. The other part, of course, Donald Trump is very fond of talking about election interference and election security. And something that is incredibly important is that Virginia is a big spot for that this week. There was two big things that happened. First, the Supreme Court, they overturned two lower court rulings as it related to the voter rolls, so that there's purging of voter rolls that was happening in Virginia. DOJ tried to stop it. Virginia is now allowed to continue purging those voters that are allegedly non-citizens, about 1,600 of them. That was one part. The other part is what the DOJ did yesterday, and that is announcing that 24 states around the country will have election monitors from the DOJ in polling places. 6 of those are going to be in Virginia, which is, of course, a very big part of Donald Trump's candidacy, and a very big part of his stump speech is talking about election security. Rev?
All right. Thank you, Gary Grumbach, for your reporting on the latest in the Trump campaign. Now we go to Ohio, and we welcome Senator Sherrod Brown, a Democrat who's up for re-election. Senator, first of all, thank you for being with us tonight.
It's good to be back, Reverend Sharpton. Thank you. I haven't seen you in a while. Thank you for getting around and doing all that you're doing. So many of us appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, you're in the last few days of a pivotal Senate race in Ohio, which we'll get to in a minute. But starting with the presidential race, Vice President Harris and Donald Trump are both on the road tonight. The VP just wrapped up her rally in Atlanta and is taking the stage. She's speaking for another rally right now in Charlotte, North Carolina. Trump will also hold his second rally today in North Carolina. He's on stage right now, or headed to the stage in Virginia. 3 days are left, Senator, and these very different campaigns with very different messages are deadlocked nationally. Who wins and why?
Well, I'm not a pundit. I mean, I've endorsed Harris, of course, and I appreciate especially how she talks about dignity of work. I've been all over Ohio in the last, every day. But to the last 2 or 3 days especially, I was in Southern Ohio, I was in Northeast Ohio, Southern Ohio, Appalachia, where there is great enthusiasm about Democrats and great enthusiasm in my race. And people recognize what I think people in Ohio are particularly offended by is that there has been more money spent against me than any Senate race in the history of the United States because I stand up to these interest groups. I stand up to the drug companies and stand up to the railroads that did such great damage in Eastern Ohio and stand up to Wall Street. And it's why when I come on this show, I ask people to come to SherrodBrown.com and contribute $20 or $25 because they're outspending me for billionaires just put big dollars in. I mean, all of this is happening, and we fight back. It's a very close race. We're probably winning by a point, but we are building a grassroots effort that we've never seen in Ohio.
Now, Democratic hopes to hold on to the Senate may come down to your Senate reelection battle against this Republican businessman, Bernie Moreno, in what's become, as you said, the most expensive Senate race ever, nearly $500 million in ad spending and counting. That counting is still going on. And in a state that just enshrined abortion rights into its constitution, you seized on your opponent's openness to federal abortion restrictions as an indicator that he's out of touch with Ohio voters. You're also counting on voters splitting their tickets in a state that went for Trump in the last two presidential contests. How does it look on the ground there in Ohio to you?
Well, we have the best ground operation we've ever seen in this state, in part because of what you just said, Reverend Sharpton, that we passed with 57% of the vote last November constitutional amendment on abortion rights. My opponent is for 100%. He said I'm 100% pro-life. He wants an abortion ban, no exceptions, no rape, no incest exceptions, no exceptions for health of the woman. So we make that contrast, and it's clear that Bernie Moreno thinks he knows better. But I think the voters know better, and we're reminding voters every day of the differences. Another one is I spent my whole career fighting for dignity of work, as you know, Reverend Sharpton, and my opponent he's a luxury car dealer. He stiffed his workers out of $400,000 in overtime pay and then shredded the records that the judge ordered him to turn over. So even though the billionaires are all over this race, even though my opponent is worth $100 million and has spent several million in this race, I rely on small contributors, and I rely on people to come to SherrodBrown.com and contribute 15, 20, 25 bucks. And with our grassroots organization, funded by these last dollars, going door to door, going to union halls, doing all the things we're doing all over the state, that's what's going to win, and that's what's going to make the difference.
I want to ask you about Springfield, Ohio. The Trump campaign seems to have moved on after spending much of September pushing a racist conspiracy theory about Haitian migrants. Eating pets there was the statements they had accused him of. The town hasn't been able to forget it so easily. They've dealt with bomb threats and right-wing groups spreading propaganda. There's also the uncertainty about what would happen to Haitians in the community should Trump win in a second term, which even Ohio's Republican governor says would hurt the local economy. What should the nation know about what's going on in Springfield since this started?
Well, what people should know about Springfield, for a comparison, if I could, I grew up in Mansfield, Ohio, a city slightly smaller than Springfield, 50,000 or so, a city that is an old proud industrial town where a lot of union members had earned good middle-class wages. And then, like Springfield, corporations moved their jobs south out of town for cheap wages. Then, because politicians of both parties hit that community, Springfield, my community, Mansfield, out, and jobs shut down and moved overseas, and the community gets hurt. Springfield's coming back, and Mansfield's coming back, and they reject the term Rust Belt. They know that these are hardworking people, and that's why Springfield just wanted to be left alone during all this. And that means my job is really the same as the governor's job, and that is to help people to help deal with some of the influx of new people and help with healthcare and help with housing and help with transportation. We've been doing that. I've worked with the governor. He's not of the same party as I am, but we agree on some things, not on others. This one we agree on, that we need to invest and help this city grow, and we're making progress on that. That's what the people of Springfield want. That's what the people in my hometown of Mansfield want. So I think we've turned a corner. I think it's better. People scoring political points, I think perhaps they moved on when they're just trying to score political points. It always hurts a community. So I feel better about where we are now, and the help that the governor's giving and I'm giving out of the federal office is going to matter.
Yeah, scoring, I might add, points at the expense of people, and very racist points at that. Thank you for being with us, Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, and good luck on Tuesday, by the way.
Thank you, Reverend Sharpton, for what you do. Thanks.
Let's now bring in my panel right here on set with me tonight. Two strategists who are both MSNBC political analysts, Juanita Tolliver, a Democrat, and Susan Del Percio, a Republican. Juanita, this week I had the honor of having former President Barack Obama on my daily radio show. I want to play a part of our conversation where he addressed his successor, Donald Trump's treatment of communities of color. Listen to this.
When it comes to the African-American community, Latino community, people who historically have been on the outside, you have in Donald Trump somebody who consistently has shown disregard to people who are not like him. I don't have to tell you, this is somebody who has made a career out of demeaning and talking about and treating people of color in ways that indicate he does not think they necessarily are full members of the American community.
Now, the former president's comments come in the wake of those controversial comments about Puerto Rico at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally last week. Outrage over the joke has reportedly spread like wildfire in battleground states like Pennsylvania. Juanita, do you think voters of color are being surging for Harris after this?
I think there's going to be some movement. I'm not sure if it's going to be a surge, but there absolutely will be some movement. We've seen that in the Puerto Rican surrogates who did endorse Donald Trump in the past, withdrawing their endorsement, saying this is the final line. And I appreciate that former President Barack Obama emphasized that this isn't something just related to politics that Trump did in 2016, 2020, and 2024. He did it in the 80s, right? Like this is decades, 70s, right? Decades-long efforts in which he dehumanized and communicated exactly how he feels about communities of color. So putting it in that context and the reality that this is exactly what he believes and how he makes decisions when in office, especially in 2016 when he delayed that aid to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. This is who he is. I think it's resonating now because voters are receiving it in a different environment than 2016 or 2020. They have a full track record of Trump in office, and they know what he's willing to do again.
And that would be when he delayed the aid. He also went down and threw towels at people. Like
disrespectful.
He did not want to be near them. Susan, the Arizona Attorney General's office is now investigating whether Trump broke the law with his violent remarks at an event with former Fox News host Tucker Carlson about former GOP Congresswoman Liz Cheney. He suggested Cheney should stand, quote, with 9 barrels shooting at her. What's your reaction to what Trump had to say about Liz Cheney?
It was repulsive. It was scary, frankly. I've been saying for a while, as you know, Reverend, when you heard me say this, he's not running to win. He's running to contest this election, and he's doing it by getting people riled up. He wants the sense of violence on Election Day and the days that follow it. That's what I believe. That's why he's going on saying things like that. I don't know if you remember when Gabby Giffords was shot and Sarah Palin made a comment soon after, and she was taken down immediately, and that was just talking about taking aim.
Right.
And it wasn't at policies. It wasn't even directly at the Congresswoman. So, I mean, things have changed a lot, but I think Trump is very deliberate in trying to drum up anger and violence, and we should all be concerned about that.
Susan, let me stick with you a minute. It's looking increasingly unlikely that Trump will make even a single campaign appearance, not even one, with Nikki Haley before Election Day. In spite of his continued weakness with the kind of moderate Republican voters and women who voted for her in the primaries. Do you think that's a mistake?
Of course it is, but I think Nikki Haley is so very lucky. I mean, what's
that
better
he's keeping
for
her at arm's length?
Because if she's looking forward, she has nothing tying her to Trump. In fact, she just basically ran against him, gave him an endorsement, never campaigned with him. So it's great news if you're Nikki Haley. And again, it shows that Donald Trump is not looking to grow a base. He's not looking to bring people in of any sort, of women, of race, of background, different backgrounds. He wants anger. And that's what he's playing on.
Juanita, just ahead of the election, tens of millions of voters have already cast their ballot, and the split so far reflects the close polls right now at 40% for each party. Several states have broken its early voting records, such as North Carolina and Georgia, with more than half of the registered voters have voted. State officials said, how much should we pay attention or would be paying attention to the numbers, and what can it tell us about the race?
Look, I'm going to say more people voting is always a positive, but I will caution everybody to not use this data to make predictions about the election, because there's a lot we don't know. When we see the gender gap, which Vice President Harris has enjoyed a 10 to 15 point advantage among women since she entered the race, those are positive signs when you see more women voting, but we can't assume every woman's voting for her. When we see Republicans surging in specific states, we can't assume every Republican is voting against Vice President Harris and for Donald Trump, because the Vice President Harris campaign has done an immaculate job reaching out to Republicans who will never vote for Trump again. So take a breath, everybody. Appreciate the surge in new voters who are engaging in early voting, as well as the records being broken with early voting, but don't try to make any predictions off of this.
All right, I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you both, Susan and Juanita. Now to the state of New York. Joining me now is the governor of the state of New York, Kathy Hochul. Governor, let's start with the House races here in New York, because they could be decisive on where the party goes in terms of the Democratic Party trying to retake the House. Democrats are hoping they can reverse gains Republicans made in the state in 2022. They are particularly focused on 4 House districts where Republicans won by fewer than 5 points in the midterm, all in districts that Biden carried in 2020. Governor, you spent the day out campaigning. What's your sense of how things are going? Are you feeling optimistic?
Oh, Rev, it's good to be back on your show. I'm feeling incredibly optimistic. I've been doing this for weeks on every weekend, making sure I'm part of the canvas launches. I went to Manhattan first thing this morning and sent goodbye to buses from individuals going over to Pennsylvania, going up to our battleground areas in Long Island and Hudson Valley. So there are young people who've never, ever, ever been involved in an election, and older people who are just joyful to be able to go out there and be part of making history, making sure that we flip the House back here in New York, and I believe we can, but also making Hakeem Jeffries the first speaker of color in American history. And that's something we're enormously proud of, helping be part of that story, and electing Kamala Harris president. So Rev, I've been working on elections since I was a teenager. I've run in 15 races myself, so I'm rather experienced. But what I wanted to do was just get a pulse of what's going out there, and it is electrifying. I'm so proud to be a Democrat and to see so many new people who cannot wait to cast a ballot for Kamala Harris and our Democrats here in the Hudson Valley and Long Island.
Now, abortion and civil rights are on the ballot here in New York. Proposition 1 would expand the list of classes protected from discrimination under state law, and it would enshrine reproductive rights in the state constitution. Right-wing donors have spent the last few weeks pouring millions into a campaign or campaigns against these measures. Are you confident it will pass?
Well, Rev, they're lying. I mean, the Republicans and these dark forces that are interceding and spending all the money that they're spending to defeat this are just wrong on the facts. What we are simply trying to do here in the state of New York is ensure that every woman going forward has the rights that they had up until Donald Trump became president. Even in a blue state like New York, you cannot take these rights for granted if it comes down to who the governor is. These rights are forever protected as long as I'm in this chair. But you don't know what the future brings or if there's ever a national abortion ban. So this is simply recognizing that women should have control over their own bodies. We're putting that in the Constitution, and Republicans are not happy about that because they know this is an issue that they lose on every single time.
Let's turn to Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden in New York City last weekend. It was an event that was designed to be the start of his closing argument out from Election Day. However, it ended up becoming overshadowed by his allies' racist and crude remarks. What were your thoughts of this rally, and what message did it end up sending to New Yorkers, Governor?
I was disgusted by, first of all, the lineup of individuals who just spewed such venom and hatred about every person you can imagine, whether it's women, people of color, and now to single out Puerto Ricans. I'm so proud to represent one of the largest Puerto Rican populations in our country, 1 million strong. And you know what he does? By not disavowing this, by not condemning this, which he should have done, and I called him out to do this, he just makes people feel that they're not worthwhile, that they don't have value. I know this because literally right after this, I went up to East Harlem. I walked the streets. I was surrounded by people who had come from Puerto Rico, these are American citizens, by the way, American citizens. They were so hurt, and this was so painful for them. I had so many hugs, and people just, we're so glad you came out here, Governor, because we felt dehumanized. And you do not think, in this great country, that we should have leaders who either say this themselves or will tolerate it at one of their rallies. I think this rally backfired on him, and it gives me, as someone who is leading the effort in our state, to ensure we flip these battleground seats. It gave me a chance to tie the Republicans running in these seats, the incumbents, closer to Donald Trump, and remind everybody, if you're voting for these Republicans in New York, you are voting for someone who supports Donald Trump, and you're anti-woman, you're anti-abortion, and basically you're anti-American because you have just trashed American values and what our country is all about over and over and over, and you will wear this on Election Day.
Last question. Looking ahead to Tuesday, what do you think is in on voters' mind in these final 3 days before the election?
They're thinking about who's going to help take care of their kids years from now. I mean, if you're a young parent and someone who's planning on having a family, or you have your own children, they may have children, it all comes down to who's going to take care of your children and your family and your grandchildren. It's that visceral. Who are you going to put your faith in? Who's going to lead this country forward? Someone who has heart and compassion and understanding, but a toughness that's required. And they will come to the conclusion that the only person who fits that description who's running right now has to be and is Kamala Harris. That's why she'll be elected president. I also think that gives us an extra bump here for our congressional races in some tough districts in New York. That's what's going to be happening. And I feel very confident about this. I feel great about this.
All right. Thank you, as always, for being with us, Governor Kathy Hochul of New York State. Coming up, the man former President Trump wants to put in charge of federal spending takes election workers for a wild ride in Michigan, but not in a cyber truck, just the back of a U-Haul. The details next.
Mr. Clean Magic Eraser.
Right-wing tech billionaire Elon Musk. And it looks like Musk is driving that effort into a ditch. Veteran Republican operatives are telling NBC News that Musk's America PAC canvassing operation, that is what it's called, it is poorly organized, according to them, and possibly riddled with fraud. Representatives for the PAC denied there are any problems. But Wired magazine reported this week that workers sent to knock on doors in Michigan face chaotic and dangerous working conditions. Mostly black employees recount being loaded into the back of a U-Haul truck with no seatbelts and being told their hotel rooms wouldn't be paid for if they failed to meet unrealistic daily quotas. Meantime, in Pennsylvania, Musk defied a Philadelphia County judge's order to show up Thursday for a hearing into the legality of his $1 million daily giveaways to registered voters. That matter likely won't be resolved until after the election. Musk has also backed a fake new website for a fictional Harris campaign initiative called Progress 2028, and then sent out text messages trying to fool voters into believing the vice president is planning extreme policies she doesn't actually support. And he is targeting Muslim and Jewish voters in Michigan with opposing and divisive political ads about Harris. Musk has invested $75 million of his own money into the pro-Trump PAC in just the past 3 months. And if Trump were to win, Musk has already been promised a role in Trump's administration leading a government efficiency commission, giving him incredible power over the agencies meant to make sure Musk and his companies are following the same rules as the rest of us. Now, I have ran campaigns and done organizing for decades, and I can tell you from experience, the way you conduct yourself and treat your staff is a reflection of your values and priorities. If your ideas are good, you don't need to resort to dirty tricks and lies about your opponents. If you care about the American people, you won't treat the ones who are working for you with contempt. We will have to wait until the votes are counted to know for sure how Elon Musk's shenanigans have impacted the election, but I'm willing to bet that Americans who see what he's up to won't be anxious to see him put in charge of cutting trillions from the U.S. budget, as Trump has promised he would do. We don't want Musk treating the country like he treats his daughter.
The level of excitement just within the past 2 days is growing. You can feel it and you can see it. And people want to be involved and people want to be engaged. I think they understand that this is going to be the most important election of their lifetimes. And they're going to be involved and they're going to vote the right way. And we're going to continue to do exactly what we're doing through Election Day to urge our people to get out to vote.
Now, Randy, the NEA recently put out an analysis of Project 2025, the blueprint for a second Trump administration, and concluded that more than 180,000 teaching positions could be eliminated, and 800,000 preschoolers could lose early education services. The Trump campaign has denied any connection to Project 2025, even though many of its authors have ties to the campaign. What would a second Trump term, what could it mean to public education?
So, you know, this is, and I'm so glad you raised Project 2025, Reb, but, you know, it's almost the same. Trump is playing from the same songbook when he tries to divide our members from the leaders that they have elected, when he tries to create fear and demonization. And what I'm seeing is that the members and the educators, public service workers, you know, by and large, they're not buying it. I've been on this bus for about 60 days. We've done about 150 stops all across America, and we are seeing that. But as to Project 2025, what Trump has done is he's actually said the quiet part out loud himself. So he may deny Project 2025 as a book, but he doesn't deny, he embraces its actions. What he's saying is he's going to cut public education. So forget about the numbers of teachers right now. Think about it. In every single school district, we have money from the federal government that goes to pay for computers. to pay for tutors, to pay for extra hands in a classroom. That's called Title I. We have money for kids with disabilities. We have money for pre-K. We have money for Pell Grants for kids who are going to college. We have money for career tech ed. All of that is going away.
Yeah.
That's what he has actually said. And I'll say one more thing. What he's also now said is that if he doesn't actually agree with what a school is teaching in terms of honest history, he's going to control that school and he's going to take away their funding. So what he's doing is basically taking away public education from anybody who's not rich.
All right, I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you both, Lee Saunders and Randy Weingarten. Politico is reporting outrage has been spreading like wildfire this week after a comic at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally made an insulting joke about Puerto Rico. The backlash is especially strong in Pennsylvania, where more than 500,000 people of Puerto Rican descent live. Joining me now is Dr. Ricardo Rosselló, former governor of Puerto Rico and currently the congressional delegate. Thank you for being with us tonight. Governor, let's start with your reaction after hearing the remarks made about Puerto Rico at Donald Trump's rally.
Well, it was an impactful moment. It was egregious. I think a lot of people were shocked and stunned. And for a brief moment there, I thought that the whirlwind of those statements would span out not only to the Puerto Rican community, but also to the broader Latino community. You know, you spoke about Pennsylvania and how almost 500,000 Puerto Ricans are there. I have the benefit and the honor of leading a bipartisan effort, Reverend, that is very akin to some of the causes you fought for civil rights, in this case for equality for Puerto Ricans and particularly statehood. In that, I have a pretty big spectrum of a focus group where I have folks on the right side and folks on the left. And what was the immediate outcome was the following. First, you know, there are people that are stuck in their ways, both on the support for Vice President Harris and the support for President Trump. But there was a line in between, a meaningful line of people that were leaning towards President Trump that recanted their support, and people that might have some sympathy towards Vice President Harris, but weren't thinking about voting, and this ignited that effort. So I do think it had a significant impact. I do wonder, however, what happened afterwards with some of the comments made by President Biden and how those might have had an effect, contrary effect.
Now, high-profile celebrities from Puerto Rico and of Latino descent have come in defense of these comments, specifically superstars Bad Bunny and Ricky Martin, to name a few. In your view, what do you think galvanized Puerto Ricans so strongly about these comments?
Well, look, Puerto Ricans are proud U.S. citizens, as you're aware. We are 3 million strong in the island, but we are almost 6 million strong in the United States. We have the second largest per capita participation rate in the military. Many of our folks are patriots. They're given the utmost for their country. And so they felt disrespected. They felt disenfranchised, and they expect a response from the campaign. And there was a response, but they really expected a direct response from the president, as he's done in the past, talked about how much he's loved Puerto Ricans. But in this case, it hasn't manifested. It keeps on growing. And the question is, can this feeling that is there in a significant Puerto Rican community that can decide Pennsylvania, can it spread out to other battleground states? And can it spread out to the broader Latin American and Latino community?
Now, Trump has tried to claim he knows nothing about the comment at the rally, but when the comedian called Puerto Rico garbage, it came after several weeks of Trump repeatedly calling America the world's garbage can. And of course, the former president has been insulting other Latin communities for years, going back to the moment he launched his first presidential campaign calling Mexicans rapists and criminals. Do you think these comments coming in the final days of the campaign could sway some Latino voters who maybe were thinking about voting for Trump to pull the levers for Harris instead?
Absolutely. I see two main groups, Reverend. One is the group that was leaning towards Trump that is not necessarily now going to jump towards Harris, but may decide not to vote altogether. And then a group of Harris supporters or likely Harris supporters that was thinking of not voting. I mean, I can read you verbatim some of the texts that I receive. Some of them from known Republicans in our group. They said, I don't think I can vote for him right now until he says something about it. They said, what the hell was my party thinking? And some of them even said that they were voting for Trump, but they weren't going to do it. So it definitely has an impact. But I want to make the broader point that can get you only so far. I think there's an opportunity now to stress the issues that are important for the communities. Housing, for example, is an important area where the candidates can address. There are single issues that don't have to deal with complicated legislation that will allow, for example, taking out of receivership Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac so that you could reduce the interest rates and you could get more liquidity and get more affordable housing. I think Latinos are expecting that direct conversation. And I would say that, getting Vice President Harris with Governor Shapiro in the final days, super popular governor over there, and have him there every step of the way might make the difference.
And they want to hear substantive issues and policies raised. Let me ask you the last question. This story has brought new attention to Puerto Rico's complex status as a territory to the United States. I have long been an advocate for Puerto Rico and its people. Back in 2001, you might remember, I did 90 days, 3 months in jail protesting the Navy's use of the Vieques Island as a bombing range. This election day, Puerto Ricans who live on the island will be voting on a non-binding referendum with 3 options for the future of the island: statehood, independence, or independence with free association. How do you think this controversy is influencing that decision?
I think people in Puerto Rico are very much entrenched on what they want. We've had 3 plebiscites in the past decade, all of which have gone towards statehood significantly. And we're going to have one in Tuesday as well. I expect the result to be similar, having statehood be the victor. And now what I caution and what I tell both candidates is this is one of the most, if not the most important issue for Puerto Ricans. If you want to help Puerto Rico, you need to resolve the underlying problems. You need to resolve the status issue. And I thank you for having gone and supported Puerto Rico as others have in the